She fined people for having the wrong shade of beige curtains, called my military boat a floating dumpster, then smashed it with a crowbar while wearing Lululemon. But when Karen tried to rewrite my property line with forged documents, I went full tactical, and her $200 0 cents KOA scam, it didn't survive the first subpoena. At exactly 2:12 a.m., my security camera caught a woman in a silk bathrobe crouched behind my dock like a raccoon with a grudge. Her platinum blonde bob gleamed under the floodlight as she spray painted the word junk and fire in red across the hull of my Navy patrol boat. The irony? She'd dropped a flashlight engraved with her own initials, C. Prescott, right on my deck like a calling card from the HOA. That boat wasn't just some rusted hunk of metal. It was my last connection to two fallen brothers, Jake and Alvarez, men I served with during my final deployment, and now it had been desecrated by a woman who treats property values like Holy Scripture and thinks her opinion trumps federal law. My name's Logan Parker. I'm 41, a former Navy engineer who now designs marine systems for a living and mostly just wants to be left the hell alone. 3 years ago, I bought a modest home in Gulfstream Point, Florida, a breezy, palm-lined neighborhood where retirees sip iced tea on pastel porches and gossip travels faster than cell signal. I parked my patrol boat behind my home on a slip that was legally part of my property and quietly served as my morning ritual spot. Most people saw a rusty old military vessel. I saw a memorial. I'd spend dawns on its deck, drinking coffee and run my fingers over the worn brass fittings, remembering the laughter of the men who didn't come back. Then Karen arrived. Her real name is Celeste Prescott, but everyone under 60 calls her Karen for short. She's the self-proclaimed queen of Gulfstream Point's HOA, a 53-year-old suburban despot with the moral flexibility of a cat and a clipboard she wields like a sword. Karen lives in the neighborhood's largest stucco mansion, drives a Lexus SUV that's never seen sand, and has two poodles named Bentley and Chanel who wear matching vests during HOA inspections. She inherited her money and retired early from something vaguely executive in finance, which apparently left her with too much free time and an insatiable need to police everyone else's lawn height and mailbox alignment. The first sign of war came, wrapped in a glossy envelope with gold embossing and a smell like overpriced perfume. "Dear Mr. Parker," the letter began, "it has come to the attention of the Gulfstream Point HOA that the vessel moored behind your property does not comply with our community aesthetic ordinance." Apparently, my boat, a 1972 Navy patrol craft, was unsightly, detrimental to neighborhood cohesion, and an eyesore inconsistent with the refined values of our shoreline community. I read the letter 3 times just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. My boat, the one that had never made a sound, never leaked oil, and never blocked a single neighbor's view of anything but the occasional egret, was suddenly enemy number 1. I decided to handle it like an adult. That afternoon, I knocked on Karen's ornate front door wearing my cleanest polo shirt and a smile I'd practiced in the mirror. She opened the door with one hand still gripping a latte the size of a flower vase, and behind her, those two poodles stared at me like hired goons. I calmly explained the boat was legally registered, parked within my property lines, and carried deep personal significance. I even offered to install decorative fencing to shield her view if that was the issue. Karen smiled at me the way someone smiles at a toddler who claims their stuffed bear has a law degree. "Mr. Parker," she said, voice dripping with condescension, "this neighborhood was designed for serenity and beauty. That relic is lowering our collective worth. It simply has to go." She said the word relic like she was spitting out spoiled wine. I thanked her, turned around, and that's when I knew we weren't dealing with a disagreement. We were going to war. I left her porch that day with my fists clenched in my pockets and the polite smile of a man raised by Marines. There's something deeply surreal about being told that a piece of your military history, something that carries the weight of loss and loyalty, is merely a decorative nuisance to someone who decorates her mailbox with seasonal ribbons. I'd faced pirates off the Horn of Africa, but I wasn't prepared for a suburban tyrant in yoga pants wielding HOA bylaws like a weaponized Bible. Still, I hoped naively that logic might win out. Maybe she'd cool off. Maybe she'd realize that picking a fight with a naval veteran over a parked boat was beneath her. But what I didn't realize then was that Karen didn't see this as petty. She saw it as a crusade. 3 days later, the second salvo landed. This time, it wasn't a letter. It was a formal HOA violation notice posted directly on my front door with pink masking tape and a photo of my boat stapled to it like it was on a wanted poster. It accused me of flagrant disregard of community harmony and warned of escalating daily fines unless the offending structure, it was removed. Offending structure, it was a boat, not a meth lab. I called the HOA office to contest the violation and was informed that Ms. Prescott had already preemptively filed compliance paperwork in case I tried to delay enforcement. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about the boat. This was about power. And Karen didn't just want the boat gone. She wanted to win. She wanted to dominate. I started noticing small things after that. My mailbox was suddenly leaning like it had been nudged by a tire. The weekly landscaping crew I hired stopped showing up. Apparently, they had received anonymous complaints about unlicensed operation and pulled out of the contract. My trash bins, which had always been inside regulation lines, were tagged with fluorescent HOA warnings about unsanctioned curb sprawl. I hadn't even heard of curb sprawl before. Then came the real kicker, a petition. Karen had circulated a document titled Save Our Shoreline, claiming my boat was leaking oil into the canal and harming marine life. She included photos, staged obviously, of oily water pulled from some other poor soul's gutter. The kicker? Some neighbors actually signed it. Either they believed her or feared being the next target. I tried reasoning one more time. I sent a detailed, polite email explaining the situation, complete with my property deed, boat registration, and photos proving there was no leak. I included a respectful request for mediation. Her reply came back in all bold. Perhaps if you spent less time reminiscing about the past and more time respecting current property values, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She wasn't just brushing off my explanations. She was mocking my service, my memories, my grief. That was the moment something changed in me. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was personal. She had declared war on something sacred, and now I was ready to fight back. But just when I thought I'd seen the worst of her petty aggression, Karen took things to a whole new level, one that turned our Cold War into an active battlefield. One quiet Thursday morning, I opened my mailbox and found a manila envelope marked urgent. Inside was a document from a company called Precision Property Solutions, claiming that my dock and the boat moored to it was sitting on community land, not mine. According to this new survey, my property line stopped 15 feet before the water. And just like that, she was no longer just coming for my boat. She was coming for my land. I stood there on my front porch, fingers tightening around the edge of that forged property survey like it might scream the truth if I crushed it hard enough. The fake boundary line had been carefully drawn, the company letterhead impressively official, and the document stamped with a seal I later discovered belonged to a defunct notary from another county. The implication was crystal clear. Karen wasn't just playing HOA hardball anymore. She was weaponizing paperwork. And if this phony survey went unchallenged, she could legally argue that my boat was trespassing on HO-controlled property. It wasn't just dirty. It was strategic, sophisticated enough to fool anyone who hadn't read their closing documents twice, like a paranoid naval engineer with trust issues. I knew I couldn't fight this alone. Entered Jenna Morales, 29, sharp as a dive knife and fresh off a stint working for the city's zoning department. I'd met her once before at a neighborhood cookout where she'd rolled her eyes so hard during Karen's opening speech that I actually heard it. When I brought her the fake survey, she laid both it and my original deed side by side across her dining table and immediately started laughing. Short, sharp disbelief. She literally just moved the line, Jenna said, pointing to the obvious copy-paste job. No legal description changes, just shifted the setback numbers like this was a kindergarten art project. And just like that, I had a lawyer with a grudge and a mission. Apparently, Karen had publicly humiliated Jenna's grandmother at a board meeting over improper flower placement, and that kind of intergenerational vengeance doesn't fade fast in small towns. But Karen wasn't slowing down either. That weekend, she showed up on my property uninvited, again, with her clipboard, 2 HOA board members in tow, in what I can only describe as the smugness of a villain 5 minutes before their downfall. They paced out my backyard with measuring tapes, took photos of my dock, and loudly declared to no one in particular that environmental contamination is a very serious offense. I caught the entire circus on my security camera, including the moment her poodle Bentley peed on my deck, and Karen pretended not to notice. The next morning, a new violation notice appeared, this one citing potential ecological hazard from derelict watercraft. It was like watching a sitcom villain spin a roulette wheel of nonsense and hitting a new infraction every time. Jenna and I began building our case. I had photos, deed records, timestamps, GPS coordinates from my boat's registration, and a digital archive of every email and letter Karen had sent. But the real breakthrough came from my neighbor, Miguel. He's the kind of guy who installs 8 security cameras because he once lost a lawn chair to a windstorm and refuses to be caught off guard again. Miguel stopped me one morning while I was walking my dog and said, "You might want to see what my camera picked up last week." Around 2 a.m. Tuesday, I followed him into his garage, and there it was, crystal clear 4K footage of Karen Prescott herself in black leggings, hoodie, and a headlamp, spray painting the side of my boat like she was tagging a boxcar. She even brought a crowbar, which she used to smash one of the restored navigation lights I'd spent weeks wiring by hand. As the footage played, Miguel just sipped his coffee and said, "Guess she's not a fan of nautical history." I saved the video in 3 formats, uploaded it to the cloud, encrypted it, and sent it to Jenna. Between the fraudulent survey, the vandalism footage, and the pile of HOA violations that now looked less like enforcement and more like a cover-up, the tide was turning. But Karen wasn't done. No. She was about to escalate things even further, and this time, she was going after my business. The first clue that Karen was shifting tactics came in the form of an email from a longtime client, a marina on the Intracoastal that I'd worked with for years. The message was polite, almost apologetic, but the subtext was blunt. They were canceling our upcoming retrofit project pending clarification of some concerning claims regarding your licensing status. I stared at the screen for a long moment, rereading the words while a knot tightened in my gut. I hadn't had so much as a parking ticket since leaving the Navy. But within the hour, 2 more emails came in, both from clients pulling out of signed agreements, citing rumors of legal trouble and possible environmental violations. Whatever Karen was doing, it was working. She wasn't just trying to remove my boat anymore. She was trying to erase me professionally. Jenna called later that afternoon, her voice low and serious. "Logan," she said, "I just saw a thread on a marine contractor forum claiming you've been stripped of your license in 3 counties for botched repairs and environmental negligence." I pulled up the forum post and my stomach dropped. It was a well-crafted piece of digital slander, complete with fake state documents, doctored inspection photos, and fabricated case numbers. It even cited a non-existent lawsuit alleging that I caused a boat fire in Key Largo, something that would have made local news had it been even remotely true. "These forgeries are professional," Jenna muttered. "No way Karen did this herself. She either hired someone or has help." That's when it hit me. She'd escalated to full-blown character assassination, and she was willing to spend money to do it. The next morning, I found a fresh violation notice taped to my truck windshield, this time from the county's Environmental Compliance Office. According to the notice, my boat was leaking hazardous fluids into the canal, and an emergency hearing had been scheduled to consider its immediate removal. There were no photos, no inspections, no evidence, just the signature of a county inspector named Raymond Colt. Jenna dug into his background, and within a few hours, found something interesting. Colt had previously been flagged for suspicious behavior in another HOA dispute downstate, where he'd filed similarly unfounded complaints that mysteriously aligned with the financial interests of a private developer. We were starting to see the skeleton of something bigger than just Karen's personal vendetta. She wasn't just abusing HOA power. She was manipulating county processes, forging state-level documents, and spreading libel to financially crush me. But then a strange thing happened. Dylan Prescott, Karen's 20-year-old nephew, started showing up near the marina where my boat was docked. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Maybe the kid just liked fishing. But he was always alone, always looking over his shoulder, and always leaving before anyone could speak to him. One afternoon, I spotted him leaning against the bait shack, nervously scrolling his phone. I approached casually, offered a soda, and struck up small talk. When I mentioned the vandalism, his face drained of color. "I don't know anything about that," he blurted. I hadn't said when it happened or what had been done, just that something had occurred. That premature denial told me everything. That night, I returned to the marina with a flashlight and a metal detector, searching along the dock just in case Karen had left behind anything else during her late-night art project. After 20 minutes of combing through damp sand and discarded fish hooks, I hit something solid. I unearthed a small flashlight, black, heavy-duty, and unmistakably engraved with the initials C. Prescott. The casing was sticky with the same red paint used on the boat's hull. Between Miguel's video, Dylan's panic, and now a physical object that literally had Karen's name on it, the evidence was stacking up fast. But what I didn't know yet was that Dylan's guilt wasn't just about that one night. He was carrying the weight of something much darker, something that would crack this story wide open. The next morning, I found Dylan sitting on the tailgate of his beat-up pickup truck across from the marina, staring at the water like it held the answers to a math test he forgot to study for. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, hair disheveled, hoodie wrinkled, fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against the rusting tail light. I walked over slowly, holding the flashlight in one hand like a question mark. I didn't say a word. I just set it down beside him. He stared at it for a long time, then said without looking up, "She told me if I said anything, she'd make my dad lose the house." The confession poured out of him like a dam cracking. How Karen had forced him to act as lookout the night she vandalized my boat, how he'd been roped into other assignments for her in the past, slashing tires, moving property markers, planting false violations. She had him by the mortgage. Literally, she'd bought their loan from a struggling bank last year and made sure Dylan knew she could call it in any time. That admission was big, but what came next was bigger. Dylan hesitated, then pulled out his phone and opened his email. He scrolled for a second, then handed it to me. On the screen was an email chain between him and Karen, dated 2 weeks before the boat incident. The subject line read, "Neighborhood Harmony Campaign." In the thread, Karen detailed specific tactics for targeting residents who opposed her, accusations to plant, code violations to invent, instructions for ensuring any evidence looked like a concerned neighbor's tip. My name showed up 5 times. And not just about the boat. She had plans to contact licensing boards, sabotage contracts, and if needed, manufacture probable cause for environmental violations. My jaw clenched. This wasn't a HOA squabble. This was organized harassment. Jenna nearly choked on her coffee when I forwarded the emails to her. "This is racketeering," she said, like actual felony level conspiracy. She's not just breaking the law, she's abusing the system that enforces it. With the emails, Miguel's video, Dylan's statement, and the flashlight as physical proof, we were finally ready to move. Jenna drafted a formal complaint and sent it to the district attorney's office with enough supporting evidence to crash a Dropbox server. At the same time, I uploaded a trimmed, clean version of the vandalism video to our private community forum. I titled the post, "When Your HOA President Moonlights as a Criminal, Watch Karen in Action." It went viral in under 2 hours. Neighbors who had been afraid to speak up suddenly came alive in the comments. Becky from 2 streets over shared how Karen fined her for emotionally aggressive wind chimes. Ron, the retired fireman, had been cited twice for having non-conforming paint hues, even though his house matched 5 others on the same street. Walter, our unofficial HOA historian, posted screenshots of financial statements showing thousands of dollars in administrative expenses with no paper trail. Stories poured in like a flood. For the first time, the community wasn't just whispering about Karen. They were united against her. Karen, of course, did what Karen does best. She retaliated. Within 48 hours, I received an emergency cease and desist letter accusing me of cyberbullying a community leader, along with a new HOA fine, this time for unauthorized surveillance equipment because of Miguel's camera footage. But she was swinging blind now, and everyone could see it. Jenna counterfilled with a motion to suspend her HOA authority pending investigation. Meanwhile, Walter, armed with years of HOA meeting minutes and the passion of a retired CPA with nothing to lose, called for a special vote to remove Karen as president. The petition filled up overnight. But even as the community rallied, Karen wasn't done, because in one final desperate move, she found a new way to hit below the waterline, this time by weaponizing my past. I should have seen it coming. When someone like Karen starts losing control, they don't retreat, they reload. 2 days after Walter's petition started circulating, I woke up to find my phone flooded with missed calls, frantic voicemails, and a dozen emails with subject lines like, "Is this true?" and "We need to talk about your background." The most chilling was a message from a client I'd been working with for months on a full retrofit project. "Logan, we trusted you. We didn't know you were under investigation for falsifying military credentials." I sat on the edge of my bed, barely breathing. My service record, my deployments, my rank, everything I'd bled sacrifice for was now being dragged through the mud in broad daylight. Karen had somehow gotten her hands on doctored documents claiming I'd exaggerated my service history. A fake whistleblower report had been submitted to a local news blog that loved scandal more than fact-checking. The article headline screamed, "Veteran or Fabricator? HOA Feud Uncovers Questions About Decorated Engineer." It was garbage, of course, but flashy enough to make people pause. In today's world, the pause is the damage. Within hours, the link was posted in boating forums, local Facebook groups, and even my LinkedIn comment section. The smear was fast, professional, and designed to stick. Jenna read the article 3 times and muttered, "This isn't just slander, this is industrial-grade character assassination." The real punch in the gut came when Peterson Marine, my biggest client and the anchor for half my income, called to postpone our upcoming contract indefinitely. I knew what that meant. Karen had found a way to hurt me where it counted most, not just in the wallet, but in my identity. She wasn't just trying to remove a boat anymore. She was trying to erase the man who built it. That evening, I found myself back on the deck of my patrol boat, fingers wrapped around a cold coffee mug, staring out at the still water that used to calm me. Now it just reflected back a version of me I barely recognized. Exhausted, outflanked, and one bad headline away from professional exile. But Dylan showed up again, this time not to confess, but to fight back. He walked up my dock, visibly shaking, and said, "She's turning on me too. She said, if I don't fix this mess, she's going to claim I acted alone, that I broke into your property and vandalized the boat without her knowledge." He pulled out his phone and showed me a new email. Karen drafting a public statement blaming Dylan for everything and painting herself as a concerned aunt who tried to intervene. "She's thrown me under the bus, Mr. Parker," he said, voice cracking, "but I'm not going down alone." That night, Dylan sat in my living room and told me everything, not just about the boat, but about every shady task Karen had sent him on in the past 2 years. He'd slashed the Hendersons' tires after they opposed a new HOA fee. He'd dumped trash in Maria Santos's yard before an HOA board election. He'd planted dead flowers in someone's garden and then cited them for landscape decay. And most chilling of all, he showed me texts from Karen asking him to borrow a small bag of pills from someone he knew and hide it in my truck. She wanted to have me arrested, framed, and discredited beyond repair. Dylan had refused, and she'd gone scorched earth ever since. As I stared at those messages, my heart pounding in my throat, I realized this wasn't just personal vendetta. It was organized psychological warfare, and Karen had been running it like a private dictatorship for years. But now we had everything, and the war was about to end. We didn't wait. The next morning, Jenna compiled every shred of evidence we had into a dossier thick enough to qualify as its own coffee table. Dylan provided a sworn affidavit, signed and notarized, detailing everything from the vandalism to the property sabotage to the near frame job with planted drugs. Jenna backed it with video footage, forged document comparisons, HOA financial records Walter had dug up, and screenshots of Karen's incriminating emails. We walked it into the county courthouse ourselves, handed it straight to the district attorney's office, and made sure there was no chance it got lost in bureaucracy. The DA took one look at the file and said, "This reads like a Netflix series waiting to happen." By noon, an official investigation had been opened, and Karen Prescott had no idea her empire was circling the drain. But we weren't done yet. That same afternoon, I posted a follow-up video on the neighborhood forum. It opened with the now comic freeze frame of Karen in her midnight black leggings and headlamp, crowbar in hand, caught in 4K committing vandalism. Then came Dylan's confession, voice only edited for privacy, detailing how Karen orchestrated an entire system of harassment and control using fear, fake violations, and financial leverage to dominate Gulfstream Point like her personal fiefdom. The response was instant and seismic. Comments poured in from neighbors who had long suspected something was wrong but never had proof or the courage to say it. "She fined us for a flamingo garden statue," one man wrote, "said it violated avian uniformity." Another neighbor shared a $250 0-cents fine for having curtains that were too reflective. Karen had been running a suburban reign of terror, and people were finally waking up. Walter, bless his retired accountant soul, stepped up and called for a community-wide vote to remove Karen as HOA president. He wasn't just thorough, he was furious. He compiled 5 years of HOA spending and exposed over $200,000 0 cents in unexplained administrative reimbursements that just happened to align with Karen's weekly tennis lessons, spa visits, and even landscaping bills for her own house. Jenna and Dylan backed it up with screenshots and timestamps showing how she'd approved the expenses herself without board review. The HOA board members, most of whom had remained silent out of fear or convenience, suddenly found their spines. 3 of them resigned on the spot. The vote to remove Karen was set for the following week, but the community wasn't waiting. That night, someone spray-painted Queen Karen's castle of lies across her pristine white garage door. Another neighbor replaced the HOA bulletin board flyers with memes of Karen photoshopped onto dictators and Disney villains. Someone even printed her head onto a cereal box labeled Karma Crunch, "Every bite bites back." The tone of the neighborhood shifted overnight. From fear to mockery, Karen went from feared tyrant to full-blown punchline, and she knew it. She stopped taking her morning walks. Her poodles weren't seen outside. The clipboard disappeared from her front porch. For the first time in years, Gulfstream Point felt like a community again, not a curated exhibit in Karen's control museum. But the real reckoning was still coming, because while Karen was busy drafting denial emails and trying to rally the last of her loyalists, the county's financial crimes unit was quietly building their own case. Between the fraudulent surveys, falsified complaints, forged licenses, and HOA embezzlement, the charges were stacking up faster than HOA fines during holiday light season. And the final blow would come not from the community or the county, even from me, but from someone Karen had never seen coming, her own past. It all came crashing down on a Tuesday morning so perfect it felt scripted. Clear skies, a soft breeze, birds chirping like they were in on it. Karen was at the Gulfstream Country Club, mid-backswing on the tennis court, when 2 plainclothes detectives approached her courtside. According to Walter, who got the play-by-play from his buddy at the pro shop, she laughed at first, thinking they were asking for a parking violation appeal. That changed fast when they showed her the warrant. She screamed something about community sabotage and tried to call the mayor from her Apple Watch while one of the detectives gently took her rack away. They cuffed her right there in front of half the club's brunch league. The video hit the neighborhood forum before the poodles even made it back home. The charges were extensive: felony vandalism, fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, witness intimidation, and embezzlement. And then the big one, racketeering, tied to the elaborate system of coercion she'd run like a HOA pair-powered crime ring. Karen was booked into the county jail in a designer tracksuit, her mugshot looking more PTA than prison. Jen and I attended the preliminary hearing where the judge read the charges in a voice so dry it could have ignited kindling. Karen sat expressionless until Dylan's testimony played. When he calmly explained how she tried to weaponize his fear to ruin lives, Karen lost it. Interrupted the court to scream he was a traitor. The judge warned her once, she screamed again. That's when her bail got denied. The gavel hit like thunder. For the first time, Karen Prescott couldn't talk her way out of something. The fallout was immediate and delicious. The HOA board dissolved pending election. Jenna was nominated president by a unanimous vote. Walter was officially appointed treasurer, and our budget, once a mystery wrapped in HOA jargon, was posted publicly for the first time in years. I was cleared of every violation, every accusation, and every ounce of slander Karen had thrown at me. Peterson Marine re-signed our contract, and 3 more clients called to apologize. But the best part? My patrol boat, once branded an eyesore, was now a neighborhood landmark. Parents brought their kids by to see the boat that took down Karen. I started giving informal tours. A third grader even asked if he could name the engine Justice. I said yes. 6 months after the arrest, we held a community BBQ right on the dock. Jenna grilled burgers. Walter told his infamous IRS in the 80s stories, and Dylan, now in therapy and rebuilding his life, stood up and apologized to every person he'd ever wronged. No one booed, no one walked away. He got a standing ovation. That night, I stood alone on my boat's deck, a coffee in one hand, watching the sunset turn the water gold. The same boat Karen tried to race had become the heart of the community she tried to control, and somehow it all felt right. Before we packed up, Mrs. Henderson raised a plastic cup and toasted to Logan's boat and to the man who taught us that fighting back isn't about anger, it's about protecting what's sacred. The cheers that followed weren't just for me. They were for every neighbor who'd been afraid to hang a flag, plant the wrong flowers, or own a rusty boat in a perfect neighborhood. Karen had built a kingdom of fear, and together we burned it down, not with violence, with truth, and maybe a meme or two. Some battles don't happen on distant shores or in foreign deserts. They unfold in our front yards, at HOA meetings, and on old boats tied to memories. This wasn't just a fight over a vessel or a violation. It was a stand against control disguised as order and fear disguised as community standards. Karen thought she could bully the neighborhood into silence, but what she didn't count on was unity, resilience, and a retired Navy guy with a stubborn streak and backup files. In the end, justice didn't arrive with flashing lights. It came from neighbors finally finding their voices. So if you're ever up against a clipboard-wielding tyrant trying to rewrite your story, remember, facts are powerful, community is stronger, and sometimes all it takes to bring down a self-declared queen is one old boat and the truth. Drop a comment below. What's your HOA horror story? You might just be next on deck.